Welcome, everybody, to our wonderful program on understanding and counteracting the growing threats to women's rights and democracy. We're very fortunate to have the wonderful Carrie N. Baker, as our main and only presenter at this meeting. And this meeting is being co-hosted by the Clearinghouse on Women's Issues and Ms. Magazine. Uh, with Ms. Magazine, we have to thank Kathy Spiller, the executive editor, and we also are lucky to have Roxy Zoll with us, who's the digital editor of Ms. Magazine. So thank you both. I am Sue Klein, the co-president of the Clearinghouse on Women's Issues, and Jan Erickson, the other co-president, is here as well. This meeting will be recorded and available later on, along with a lot of digital resources that we'll make available on our Women's Clearinghouse website. It's womensclearinghouse.org. I'm delighted that an old friend, Carrie N. Baker, will be presenting this wonderful program. And I met Carrie in my early days at the Feminist Majority Foundation when we were both at a National Women's Studies Association meeting, and I was able to introduce her to Kathy Spiller. And even then, Carrie knew that she wanted to write for Ms. and has been writing for Ms. steadily and editing and doing many other wonderful activities to help Ms. be a success since 2010. So thank you for that, Carrie. And Carrie is exceedingly well qualified to talk on the issues of this meeting. In addition to being a longtime women's studies professor and the distinguished professor and chair of the program on the study of women, gender, and sexuality at Smith College, which is in Massachusetts. She is also a lawyer and a very experienced journalist, not only for Ms. but other things as well. As a matter of fact, I think she was almost qualified as a physician with her excellent medical reporting, as shown in her book on abortion pills in the U.S. history and politics. It's my pleasure now to turn the meeting over to Carrie, and she will inform us and help us understand the many threats to women's rights and democracy. And what's more than that, she will inspire us on how to fight these threats and continue our substantial progress. So thank you, Carrie. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Sue. I really appreciate it. So, great to be here today with you all. I want to just call out Professor Jane Caputi and her class. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And also, I want to also call out the folks from Wham Theater in Lenox and Janae Carino, who is the artistic director. Wonderful to have you here today. Yes. And Janae was on my radio show last Tuesday. So Sue has given me a very, very ambitious task here today, which is to talk about the threats to women's rights by the Trump administration. And that is a huge task, including not only Project 2025, but the more recent, Saving America, Saving American Families report from the Heritage Foundation, the congressional actions, the court rulings. I mean, that's massive. There have been so many attacks on women's rights. In addition, though, she's also asked me to talk about how we're fighting back, and that has also been massive. So I've got a ridiculously long talk, which I'm probably not going to make it all the way through, or I'll have to sort of rush through. But I do have slides, and I know Roxy just put the slides into the chat, and so they're available to you because I will rush through them. But I want to just say you can put questions in the chat, and Roxy's going to be paying attention to those. And Roxy, feel free to just sort of dive in. I'll also keep an eye on those. She'll also be, as I'm talking about various articles that Ms. Is publishing, she'll be popping those in the chat. And I will say that Ms. is constantly covering what's happening to women's rights and LGBT rights, and doing an amazing job covering what's happening. You won't see it in the mainstream press. You won't see feminist coverage of women's rights and LGBT rights in the mainstream press. Or if you see it, it's not covered well. So I really encourage you to, follow Ms. You can sign up and get, a weekly newsletter, a daily newsletter that has our stories. We have about, I don't know, Roxy, 5 to 6 stories a day with the most important things going on. Yeah. And so please do follow us. And okay. And you can also subscribe to the magazine. So if you go to msmagazine.com, we do still publish 4 times a year a print version of the magazine. Here's an example. This was the issue that came out right after the election, rolling up our sleeves about the resistance. And I'll be referencing this today. So I'm going to share my slides now. The talk is entitled the erosion of women's rights under Trump. And I should have said, and the resistance to that erosion. So this piece is the piece that I published actually before the election. It was called Misogynist Manifesto. It was about the Project 2025 sort of plan for what Trump would do if he took office. And I'm starting here, even though obviously we're in 2026, because I think it's really important to talk about what their plan was and how far along they are in the plan. And actually, for this talk, it was really interesting for me to go back and see, okay, what have they done and what have they not done? I think it's really interesting. So I'll talk about that first. I think, Trump distanced himself during the election, but of course, as soon as he got into office, he appointed all the people who wrote that project to his cabinet and to top positions in his government, and immediately began to pursue the goals of this project. And I'll talk a minute. There's a website that is sort of minutely tracked what he's done and what he hasn't done. This project, as many of you I'm sure know, it was a 900-page policy agenda for what he planned to do. So I'll get to what has he actually accomplished, but I want to say a little bit about what it set out to do. Ms. has published a number of articles, sort of detailed what has he done. 1 year, 53 ways the second Trump administration is harming women and families. One of their more recent reports, the Heritage Foundation's plan to keep women uneducated, pregnant, and subservient. The conservative proposal to take money from poor single moms and give it to married couples. Ms. Cross posts a lot of Jill Filipovic, who's great on looking at women's what's happening to women under the Trump administration. So, they had 4 main goals: restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. So this is a lot of where the attack on women came in. We'll be talking about that. I mean, it also came in on some of these other goals, but that's the main part where they, want to send women back home by attacking their workplace rights, attacking educational access, and then, of course, attacking reproductive rights, attacking women's rights, like single mothers' rights to support their family, and pushing women back into marriages. Project 2025 policy goals around women, shoring up biblically based heterosexual marriage and procreation. They actually use that language. Eliminating abortion and restricting access to contraception and reproductive health care. It's key. They're going after contraception, not just abortion. Gutting programs to help poor and low income single mothers feed and care for their children. By doing that, it pushes women into marriage, and redirecting resources toward married couples with biologically related children. They're talking about heterosexually married couples. This is particularly an focus of their most recent report, Saving America, Saving the American Family. I'll talk about that later. Eliminating workplace protections against sex discrimination, rolling back Title IX protections against sexual harassment and assault at educational institutions, eliminating LGBTQ rights, and so much more. I want to, so this, of course, you probably remember when they set out this list of all the words they were going to eliminate from every, website of the government, agency, regulation, contract, grant, piece of legislation. These were some of the terms: sexual orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, inclusion, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, and reproductive rights. It seems like they pretty much did that. They really went through, and this is a quote from Project 2025. They really did appear to go through and remove all these terms, DEI, all of it. They talked about it as, woke language. And, we saw this when they went through and, they removed Enola Gay off of, websites, thinking it was talking about gay rights when it was, the name of the mother of the guy that flew the bomber that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. I mean, it was kind of absurd. They used, search and delete. But sure enough, they did it. Here's some of the language that had, and again, I read this because this is kind of the mentality and the tone of the people that are in office. Married men and women are the ideal natural family structure. Hold on, this is moving here. Because all children have a right to be raised by the men and women who conceived them. The government policy should, quote, maintain a biblically based, social science reinforced definition of marriage and family. Who knows what the hell that is? Here are the page numbers if you're curious. You can read it for yourself. For the sake of the child well-being, programs should affirm that children deserve both the love and nurturing of a mother and the play and protection of a father. You can sort of see the gender stereotypes right in the very language. The next Health and Human Services Secretary should reverse the Biden administration's focus on LGBTQ equity, in quotes, subsidizing single motherhood, God forbid, disincentivizing work and penalizing marriage, replacing such policies with those encouraging marriage, work, motherhood, fatherhood, and nuclear families. And then, of course, they demonize and defund childcare. Children who spend significant time in daycare experience higher rates of anxiety, depression, and neglect, as well as poor educational and developmental outcomes. These are quotes, okay? Instead of providing universal daycare, funding should go to parents either to offset the cost of staying home, and they say parents, but we know which parent they're talking about, with a child, or to pay a familial in-home childcare. For familial in-home childcare. I guess that's, J.D. Vance's solution of getting grandma to stay home. By the way, there's no evidence that in daycare, children in daycare experience higher rates of anxiety, depression, and neglect. Actually, it's good for child socialization. And then they go on. Project 2025 calls for prioritizing funding for home-based childcare, not universal childcare. And it recommends eliminating Head Start, the critically important early childhood education program for low-income children. It's one of the most successful government programs. And of course, Trump has tried to hammer away, and I'll talk about this later, at Head Start. And by the way, note that Project 2025 does not support paid parental leave, which is something that's absolutely critical for women in the workplace, for parents in the workplace. There's nothing said about that in Project 2025. The project pressures people to marry. I won't read this because for being short of time, but there's all kinds of policies in there putting pressure on families to marry. It also stigmatizes single mothers. It condemns single motherhood. Um, um, it makes single parenting harder. The plan recommends adding work requirements for single parents receiving any non-cash benefit worth $50 per month for 6 consecutive months, including TANF, which is, welfare. Project 2025 recommends adding work requirements to receive Medicaid. It redirects TANF grants meant to help low-income mothers feed their children toward anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers that coerce pregnant women to carry unwanted pregnancies to term and have children they cannot afford to feed. It eviscerates abortion rights. And I'll get to this more, but because many of these things they have done, but it, just across the board attacks abortion rights. It supports policies of surveillance of pregnant women. It attacks contraception and sex education and redirects money towards fertility awareness programs, which are notoriously unreliable. It redirects federal research dollars towards programs that would find how quote unquote harmful abortion is, which is not research. If you tell people what you want them to find, that's like basic. In the workplace, it directs, and this is something he did like on day one, it directs the president to rescind Lyndon Johnson's executive orders prohibiting race and sex discrimination in the civil service, which means government work, and by government contractors. It directs the government to narrow the applicability of Title VII, which prohibits sex discrimination and race discrimination in education. And it does that by ending disparate impact cases and refuses to enforce laws against LGBTQ discrimination. It would expand religious exemptions for employers to discriminate based on sex and sexual orientation. It would weaken the power of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to enforce Title VII. He's done many of these things already. And on, diminish the rights of unions. He's definitely done that. In education, it would eliminate the Department of Education, revert to Trump's prior Title IX sexual harassment and assault standards that would place burdensome restrictions on survivors, narrow the meaning of Title IX to only prohibit discrimination based on biological sex, rather than sex stereotyping, which would eliminate LGBTQ discrimination protections, and on and on. So, what has Trump actually already done? So I published this in April of last year. In just 100 days, Trump has already attempted to enact 1/3 of Project 2025 agenda related to women's rights and LGBTQ rights. So let's see where we are today. So this is, I went, right before this talk. Where are we today? And this has to do sort of overall of the 320 policy objectives of Project 2025, Trump has, or the Trump administration has achieved 132 of them. That's 41%. There are another 69 that are in progress, and work on 119 have not yet started. That's 37%, which that's kind of interesting. And I can talk a little bit more about this. I will in a minute. But in the first year, he's achieved 40%. And, he is underway. He's either achieved or underway 63%. And so let's break this down a little bit more. And by the way, this comes from a website called project2025.org. observe, just if you just go to www project 2025, and you can break it down by area. So if you look at this, you can sort of see the top is reproductive rights, next is LGBTQIA rights, civil rights, and aid. And so I just took some areas. So if you look at reproductive rights, the top band, he's done of the total 31, he's done 14, and there's 4 in progress. In the area of LGBTQ, there's 19 total. He's done 11, and there's 4 in progress. And you can sort of see, let me just, I don't know if you can see this thing. I can't really get rid of it. So he's done about half of the reproductive rights. He's done 68% of the LGBTQ, of civil rights. He's done 79%. I'll tell you what he's actually done in a second, but you can get a sense of how many he's done by searching in these different areas, which I find a little bit helpful just to sort of see how far. So let me dig down into it. So looking at, let's just look at, this is looking at reproductive rights. Some of these go across different areas, but this is sort of digging down into reproductive rights. So you can see the first one on the upper left, robust accommodations for religious employees, promote fertility awareness-based methods for family planning. That's, you know, in other words, redirecting away from contraception towards, you know, the rhythm method. Withdraw Biden era guidance that strengthened HIPAA protections for reproductive health care. So that's, you know, like your privacy protections if you go in and have abortion or get contraception. Rescinding guidance that requires hospitals to perform an abortion to save a woman's life under EMTALA. He immediately did that when he got into office. Clarify that no employer is required to provide accommodations for abortion. He did that right away. Actually, a judge did that. Some of them are done by executive order. Some of them are done by Trump-appointed judges. Some of them have been done by Congress. DOJ withdrew from lawsuits to uphold EMTALA. That was done by the Department of Justice. So all of these have been done. You can see the date that they were completed, and then a note sometimes. Sometimes a Trump action's been overturned by court, and it will tell you that. Prohibit USAID from funding sexual and reproductive health. So that was done in February of 2025, right away. Prohibit abortion travel funding. That in the Department of Defense, that was done pretty quickly. Reverse prohibitions on healthcare discrimination based on pregnancy to cover abortion. That was done by DHS in January of 25. So this is really helpful to see what they've done. The Hyde Amendment, that was done right away. Reinstating Mexico City was done right away. You know, saying they're not going to enforce the FACE Act, that was done right away. And of course, they also, Trump pardoned all the people that were in jail for FACE Act violations. That was just horrific. And those people are now out again committing crimes and attacking clinics. That was horrific. So these are some of the ones that are in, two more that they've done. Prevent the VA from covering abortion services. He did that more recently in December. And then rescind the Office of Refugee Resettlement from providing abortion access for pregnant accompanied youth. And this is a Filipovic story about that. He's shipping all those youth to Texas so they can't get abortions. And some of those youths are 13, 14, and they're rape victims. And Filipovic did a great story on that. I think we maybe cross-posted that. Okay, and then here are some of the in progress. One of them was end taxpayer funding of Planned Parenthood. That was actually done through the Republican budget reconciliation bill signed by Trump. That was partially blocked by a court, but then reinstituted. He eliminated HHS Reproductive Healthcare Access Task Force, but they haven't yet installed the pro-life task force. That's why it's in progress. And so you can just see, you know, prioritize traditional heterosexual marriage messaging. I think that's still under progress. Restore Trump era religious exemptions. That's under progress because that entails you know, a whole process that's underway. So that's reproductive rights. these are the things they haven't started yet. So this is a really helpful website to see kind of what they've done and what they haven't done. And you can explore that on your own. Um, and what they haven't done, interestingly, is much on abortion pills. And, you can see that the whole stuff on mifepristone, and I'll get into this more later, but the FDA has said that they are doing a quote unquote safety review on mifepristone, but they're waiting until after the election because they realize that would be very damaging if they were to withdraw FDA approval of either telehealth abortion or certainly of FDA approval altogether of mifepristone. And but there are a bunch of lawsuits across the country trying to do that by court order. And the DOJ, interestingly, has put in a motion in the Louisiana lawsuit to try to get that case dismissed, because I think that the Trump administration is very worried about the impact of a ruling restricting mifepristone on the fall elections. That would just be a real, I think, really unpopular thing with the American people, because the vast majority of Americans, even in Republican states, support abortion rights. And it would have real concrete impacts on people. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. So, all right. So, let me talk a little bit more about things Trump's done in his first month in office. As I said, he had pardoned a bunch of anti-abortion extremists convicted of terrorizing abortion clinics, and said he would use the law as a means to protect instead of protecting abortion clinics, protect anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers. He defunded domestic and sexual violence services across the country, while rates of domestic violence have increased, especially in states banning abortion. He's also eliminated the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights Enforcement of Title IX's protections against sexual harassment and assault on college campuses. In the workplace, he has dismantled longstanding protections against workplace sex discrimination, included relating to disparate impact, sexual harassment, and pregnancy discrimination. The EEOC has deprioritized enforcing sex discrimination lawsuits and focused on discrimination against white men and Christian people. This is the long list of things he's tried to do to gut Head Start. He hasn't actually fully gutted it. He has done a lot to hobble it, and he has shut down various Head Start programs, but he has not, fully disbanded it. But it has been really, really damaging. He has frozen funding. Courts have overturned these freezes, and he's definitely trying to debilitate it. Of course, he is trying to ram through the SAVE Act through Congress, which is now being debated in the Senate. And he's threatening if the Senate doesn't pass it, he's going to try to do it by executive order, which, is just stupid. Ms. is covering this closely. I strongly encourage you to continue to follow the Ms. Coverage, and I strongly encourage you to contact your members of Congress, particularly now your members of Senate. This is really a Trojan horse to disenfranchise women. Why? Because 80% of women change their names, and this would require that you have a birth certificate that matches your driver's license, which, women have changed their names, it wouldn't match, or that you have a passport, and many women don't have passports. Obviously, it would also affect trans people that don't have a birth certificate that matches their ID as well. So this is that report I mentioned earlier, Saving America by Saving the Family. This is just terrifying. I strongly encourage you, if you have the stomach, to read it. It came out in January. Jill Filovovic has great coverage of it. We cross-posted it here in Ms. She really summed it up well. This is what she said it means for women. Settle for any man who decides he wants you. Don't go to college, marry early, have as many babies as possible, quit your job, or don't pursue one in the first place, to stay home full time and depend financially on your husband, shoulder the blame if you wind up married to a jerk, wind up impoverished if you divorce, face social condemnation if you fail to follow the trad wife script. Contraception should be illegal or at least hard to get. Same for IVF and other fertility treatments. I mean, it's really appalling. And it goes on. I mean, just read her piece. You don't have to read the report, just read her piece. She quotes from it a lot, and it's really appalling. And this chart, I think this is from the report. So basically, it's only for married people with biologically related children. It's only for families with one wage earner who earns at least $30,500. It's funded by eliminating Head Start. And this is how the money is distributed. It only goes for children until they reach the age of 4. And this is how and it goes for people that earn up to, I think it's like $400,000. If you have one child, you get $4,000. If you have two children, you get like $8,200. If you have three children, you get $14,000. And then once you get to $400,000, the money tapers off until you get to $700,000. It's a way of funding rich white people who are married with biologically related children to support white supremacy. That's the bottom line. I mean, quite frankly, they want more they want to deport all the brown people and produce more white babies. And, I know that sounds conspiratorial, but read my colleague here at Smith College, Loretta Ross, and she explains all of this. Okay, so I've written a few articles about the impact of MAGA policies on women and girls. And it's kind of summed up in this piece. America is an increasingly dangerous place for women and girls. Under Trump, attacks on women's safety, healthcare, and economic security are escalating, making the US an increasingly perilous place to be female. I also did a piece called Orwell's 1984 is now. Orwell's 1984 is now, thanks to Trump's playbook of reversal, gaslighting, and control. Feminist language is being twisted into a weapon against feminism itself. And this is like the whole, save our sports, women are being attacked by trans people, the whole executive order on protecting women, it's just really, as a feminist, long-term feminist, to see them weaponizing Title IX, which they've never supported women's sports, to gut Title IX and Title VII by getting rid of the sex stereotyping theory that was established in the Hopkins case in 1999 is just heartbreaking for me as somebody that has taught gender law and policy for 25 years. So, how are we fighting back? Well, I'm going back to this article that I wrote right after the election. Kathy Spiller, we had a whole magazine ready to go. And then Trump, got enough electors to take over. And she's like, okay, rewrite a piece. What are we going to do? And so I, somehow managed to put this piece together, rolling up our sleeves, and interviewed people like Skye Perryman at Democracy Forward and some of these Democratic attorneys general. And we wrote this piece and talked about what's the resistance going to look like. And I went back and read it for this talk, and it's really fascinating to kind of look back on what happened in the first year and a bit and kind of where we are. And look at these subheadings. As Trump's second term begins, feminist advocates are mobilizing to counter his administration's extremist agenda. From swift legal challenges to strategic state-level protections, a fierce resistance is ready to defend democracy and women's rights. And we broke it down. It was in the print magazine, but we broke it down into 4 parts on the website. You can read it. A lot of it was legal challenges. And a lot of it was passing new state laws. Democratic governors and attorneys general are moving to Trump-proof their states, fighting to protect abortion rights, LGBTQ protections, and workplace equity. Certainly a lot of legal challenges, and I'll give you some statistics on that in a minute. But advocates at the state level use the moment to do things in states that we could never get done before. I'll give you an example here in Massachusetts. We fought like hell in Massachusetts to get rid of the old anti-abortion laws, these archaic laws that had been in place before Roe. And then we passed something called the Roe Act in 2018, which created an affirmative right to abortion. But in that fight, we couldn't get a lot of things. We had a Republican governor at the time. We couldn't get removal of parental notification. We couldn't get good laws around, you know, uh, protecting the right to abortion in the third trimester. We couldn't get a number of things. As soon as Trump got elected, we got some great things. We removed parental notification for 16 and 17-year-olds. We got some protections for access to abortion in the third trimester. We got expanded funding for abortion. We got funding to combat crisis pregnancy centers. That's just one example. I think across the country, we got constitutional amendments protecting abortion rights. We were able to, at the state level, um, uh, use Trump's election to get things we've been fighting for decades. And so we took this opportunity, and the point of this article that I wrote in Ms. was we should not only defend, but we should use this as an opportunity to go on offense, to get things that we have not been able to get for a long time. And that happened, pass new state laws. So that to me was really inspiring, and it happened. And we've been covering this for Ms. Magazine. So going back to Project 2025, at the beginning, he did a lot. He got a lot of these things. And you look at that in the first 6 months, 95. And then a little later, another 115 by August. But look how it flattens out. Look how it flattens out. Between August and February of this year, he only got like 14 more. And I will say this first 50 and the first bit here, a lot of those are executive orders, and a lot of them have been invalidated in court. He did a lot of the easy things. A lot of that is like, disbanding the reproductive rights task force, disbanding the gender equity. A lot of it was things that didn't actually matter. Now, some really did matter, like the global gag rule or the, various things. But a lot of it were things that actually weren't enforceable in law. There were things that Trump was just sort of ranting and raving about. I mean, even the gender ideology order doesn't actually have the force of law. I mean, Trump does a lot of things that he says this is the new law, but it's not actually the law. I mean, even his executive order that says disparate impact's no longer a thing. I mean, the president doesn't get to say what the law is. Congress passes the law and the courts enforce the law. And so as I thought about it more and more, and I'm not saying this is the true with all of these policy things, but a lot of them actually, it's just Trump being Trump. And so I don't know. I just think that we take him sometimes, we give him more legal authority than he actually has. And I'll say a little more about this in a minute. The second Trump administration, so I want to say more about the lawsuits. And this is like Democracy Forward and the DALGA, the Democratic Attorney General's Association. The second Trump administration, beginning in 2025, has faced over 600 lawsuits from various organizations, states, and groups. So it's not just the states, the AGs, it's orgs like Democracy Forward and groups. And by the way, when I interviewed Skye Perryman, she had this massive, she sent it to me, Excel sheet. And this was before Trump went into office, with this huge, I forget what she called it, a threat assessment table. And she had over 200 advocacy organizations that had been participating for over a year in creating this threat assessment. What are all the things Trump's going to do? And quite frankly, Project 2025 was helpful in putting together this threat assessment. And they had not only, here are all their threats, and there were 300 of them, they had who was going to bring the lawsuit, what was going to be the legal theory. And sometimes they'd even written the briefs. They even knew what the arguments were going to be. And so they were ready to go. I mean, yes, Trump was much more ready to go this time around than in his first administration when he didn't even think he was going to win, but so were we. So he's faced over 600 lawsuits from various organizations. The New York Times is tracking over 650 lawsuits with over 500 currently active and many cases focusing on executive orders. The administration has reportedly lost in court more than 70% of the time, according to Democracy Forward. Pretty interesting. And this is really interesting too. If we think about Trump, like we think of him as like shaping the court so much because we think of the Supreme Court. But actually, if you look at the courts as a whole, the federal courts as a whole, there's a paucity of opportunities for him to reshape the court in this second administration. And quite frankly, Biden and Obama have had a whole lot of appointments in the lower courts. Um, and this is a Brookings Institute opinion recently published. President Trump began his second term with a flurry of orders to change the federal government structure and policy. Federal district judges, almost 60% of whom are Democratic appointees, have stymied or slowed down those efforts, even as appellate courts, especially the Supreme Court, have so far been somewhat more accommodating. Although, a bunch of Trump judges have also been striking down his actions. President Biden's 189 district court appointees, including the Court of International Trade, are a main reason for the dominance of Democratic appointees among district court judges. And his 45 circuit judge appointees helped produce the current party of appointing president parity on the courts of appeals. So it's something to keep in mind. I also think the dysfunction of Congress, and it really is why it's absolutely imperative that we take the Senate in the November elections. And I'm going to get back to that. The Senate, of course, confirms judges.
Carrie, can I
Okay.
ask real quick something in the chat? The spreadsheet that you said, the threat assessment spreadsheet, was that public?
I don't know if it was.
Okay.
I don't think it was. I got it as a journalist, but I don't know. You could go on the Democracy Forward website. I suspect it was not, just
Okay.
because they didn't want the other side to see it.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't think when she sent it to me, I don't think she said it wasn't public, but maybe it was just assumed. It was a while ago when this interview happened. So, and so and so I've been talking a lot about law and policy and courts and legislatures and la 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 la. But now I want to, so I so, okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the impacts on people. And one of the areas, my areas, is abortion pills. And I know a lot about abortion pills and just abortion generally. One area that, I want to talk about the impact of all of what's happening, not just Trump coming into office, but Dobbs in 2022. So now we're going on 4 years, and half of states restrict abortion, 13 outright ban it, another 4 ban it at 6 weeks, which is basically outright banning it, another 2 at 12 weeks. But abortion's gone up 20% since Dobbs. It topped 1 million in 2024 versus 930,000 the year before Dobbs. I mean, how is that? Well, a bunch of states have passed these shield laws. And so doctors in those states are serving people in Texas and California. And those states are strengthening those shield laws. States like Illinois, upper right-hand corner, are requiring public universities to offer telehealth, abortion pills. Teens in states with parental notification laws are using telehealth to do an end run around parental notification. A lot of people are thinking outside the box. People are, determined not to be restricted by ridiculous policies. in addition, one of the areas that I have done a lot of work in is people realizing that abortion pills are super safe and the medication should actually be over the counter because it's safer than Tylenol. And so we have this massive network of community groups just sharing pills for free. And tens of thousands of people are receiving pills from free through these community networks in the United States that have learned how to do it from people in Mexico and from around the world. And they're doing it in really caring feminist way. It's kind of like the Jane Collective 21st century. And I've been publishing stories on this, and I'm sure Roxy's dropping it in the chat as we speak, but these people are wonderful. I just have a new piece coming out, and they're doing it so humanely and so feministly. And it's extra legal, it's extra medical, but it is I don't know. I'm so inspired by the feminists that I'm interviewing every day, their courageousness, their determination, their creativity, their brilliance. A lot of people ask me, are you discouraged? And I say, of course, I'm discouraged every day by what the administration is doing and the sort of hatefulness of them. But I am absolutely encouraged by the resistance at multiple levels. My attorney general, all the Democratic attorney generals, by the resistance, by the governors, but more importantly, by the grassroots people that just, by all of you that are just so determined. Yeah, this is my slide about community groups. Oh, and there's a bunch of international telehealth providers. I did a series on international telehealth providers that will be there no matter what, as the community networks will be there no matter what. If anybody on this call needs to know how to find abortion pills, no matter what Trump and company does, go to plantcpills.org. There's everything you need to know. And those are amazing people. So this is the issue. This is part 3 and 4. As Trump's second term threatens progress, activists and lawmakers are using state constitutions to protect and expand women's rights. So advocates are expanding rights using state ERAs, long dormant state ERAs, and new constitutional amendments guaranteeing abortion rights. I'm writing an article that's just about to go up. I think Roxy's probably about to press go on it. I interviewed this lawyer at the Lawyering Project. I should check my phone here. This is so wonderful. She is bringing a lawsuit against Colorado's parental notification law under Colorado's Equal Rights Amendment that was passed in 1972. And under the 2024 abortion rights constitutional amendment, arguing that the parental notification law is based on sex stereotypes that say that women should carry pregnancies to term because that's the proper thing that women should do. And it doesn't put any burden on their male sexual partners to notify their parents. And that's sex discrimination. And that it violates the abortion rights constitution. She goes on and on about how it's about that young women shouldn't be having sex, and that this is basically punishing young women for having sex by forcing them to talk to their parents about it, but that young men don't need to talk about it because it's fine for young men to have sex, and that young women have the responsibility to control young men to not have sex. I mean, she was so brilliant. Her name is Rupali Sharma. And it's a really long article because I just had to quote everything she said because she was so brilliant. And so it's a really creative way of using a long dormant ERA to strike down these parental notification laws that are just so sexist. And I went to an ERA conference at NYU Law School last weekend, and they're talking about using ERAs to strike down funding restrictions, like Medicaid restrictions on funding for abortion, to strike down waiting periods, which are totally paternalistic, to strike down child marriage laws. A bunch of states still let, 15-year-olds get married. And it's usually 15-year-old girls and much older men, and all kinds of laws that are totally sexist. And so I just think we need to, activate these ERAs. What else? Um, yeah. So there is a case in Pennsylvania to strike down a Pennsylvania ban on Medicaid coverage. And so that's, the court ruled a while ago that in principle that could happen, but it's right now in the lower court, being tried on the merits, and that should come down any day now. A Michigan group is suing over a law that basically, and a bunch of states have this, if you have a living will that says you want life support removed, if you're pregnant, the living will is invalid. And so a group in Michigan is suing, saying that's sex discrimination, and violates their new constitutional right to it violates their state constitution. So there's a lot of we're being re-energized by this rollback of women's rights to use state constitutions, because the federal constitution, there's no reason to bring a federal constitutional right. We've been too reliant on the federal constitution, but we have some good state courts, particularly in progressive states, and we should use them. We should use them and use them for LGBTQ rights as well. So, through litigation, state policies, and local action, feminists are ready to defend and advance the rights of women and girls over the next 4 years. We're getting ourselves battle ready. We have a whole arsenal of tools, and we're working closely with grassroots activists and other law and policy organizations. We all need to work together. That was the closing quote in my article in the Rolling Up Our Sleeves article. And so I want to end with the November elections. We have absolutely got to take back the House and the Senate so that we have no more budget reconciliation bills like we saw last year. And so we have no more horrible appointments of like this new DHS or whatever, Homeland Security guy that just got confirmed, that we have no judges, Trump judges, that get confirmed, but most importantly, so that we can not only defend and advance women's rights, but so that we can achieve final recognition of the federal Equal Rights Amendment, not for this Supreme Court, but for a future Supreme Court. We need to get a resolution passed Congress. We can do this in the Senate with a point of privilege, because it's a constitutional related amendment. We don't need a filibuster proof majority in the Senate. We just need a majority through a point of personal privilege, a majority to pass a resolution that just says we recognize that 38 states have ratified, that rescissions are invalid, and that the timeline is not binding. That's all we need. And we've got the federal ERA because it has already been ratified. The federal courts do not have any role under Article 5. The president has no role under Article 5. It is entirely in the political branch of the government and the states. That's my book. That's the QR code. It's open access. I think that Roxy has dropped the link to my articles in the chat, and I will open it up to questions now. I can't believe I got through all that. Of course, there's only 5 minutes left, but
Carrie, I'm
Roxy.
seeing a couple of questions about action steps. I know some of them were, sprinkled in from your presentation, but do you want to just talk for a couple of minutes about how can people channel their information they just learned from you and their rage, today or over the next couple of weeks and months?
Yeah, I really think the most important thing is the November elections. Depending on where you live, or anywhere really. I mean, like I say, we have got to retake the House and the Senate. And I think there is real potential. If you look at what's been happening around the around the nation in the elections so far, and you just look at the polls. We first got to make sure that the SAVE Act doesn't happen. So right away, start contacting your members of Congress and make sure that doesn't happen. Get very involved in poll working, and making sure that we have honest elections, that we fight back against all the shenanigans that they're trying to do at the grassroots level. I'm talking about down the street at your polls, and I'm talking about at your state capitals, at the counting level, so make sure that that is happening. Look where the swing states are. That is, where things happen. Look where the House and Senate races where we can actually turn things. Feminist Majority Foundation often concentrates in, and Roxy, maybe you can drop the information about how people can, support Feminist Majority. What we do is that we mobilize young college students to get people registered to vote and turned out to vote, particularly young college women, who way disproportionately vote to support, strong candidates, feminist candidates. But there are plenty of groups that are doing this good work. So I really think that's super important. But there are a lot of other ways you can support reproductive rights by, look in your own state, your own backyard, if you want to see what the possibilities are there. If you're in, Colorado, or you're in Pennsylvania, like there's cases going on there, or see what your legislature, like in my state, we're working on legislation to remove laws that are that could be used to criminalize pregnant people. But you might also look at laws that are more affirmative laws, like, there's a lot going on around maternal mortality. These abortion bans are creating huge increases in maternal mortality in states banning abortion. If you like, I know there's folks in Florida, work around maternal mortality increasing in your state, or, crisis pregnancy centers are just swarming. They're trying to shut down reproductive healthcare clinics and quote unquote replace them with crisis pregnancy centers. So there's a great campaign down there to expose crisis pregnancy centers, to make people aware that these CPCs are pretending to be reproductive health clinics and then surveilling pregnant people and then turning them into the cops. You folks down in Florida, you need to go onto the Plancy Pills website and order those stickers that have their QR code, and let folks know that they can get abortion pills. And it's not a crime to use abortion pills, to have them on hand. You can order them in advance, have them in your medicine cabinet, just in case. Let folks know you can get them if you're pregnant and don't want to be. You can get them for free from community networks, or you can get them from a doctor on a sliding scale fee, as little as $5 or even free, from doctors in the United States or internationally from doctors. Again, sliding scale fees for many of them. There's just so many ways to get involved. Go to your favorite feminist organization, National Women's Law Network, Feminist Majority Foundation. I mean, Roxy, what else? Ms. is always publishing about organizations that are doing feminist work, and we often end the article with, and here's how you can get involved.
I agree with all of those. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm of reproductive age. I have advanced provision abortion pills, spreading the word, making sure people know you are a resource, and talking openly about abortion is one of the ways that I feel like I can channel my power. I'm seeing in the chat as well, writing. I'm going to drop my email in the chat, and I'll put information on how to write for Ms. But writing publicly, and then, that can turn into, even if it's a letter to the editor at your local paper, it can turn into a radio interview. So just spreading the word and using the power of your voice to talk is another one.
Absolutely. For me, when I get depressed or I get angry, and it's inside of me, to write is to get it out. And it's a way to connect with people. And to me, it's so empowering to write. More questions? Or are we out of time? I can stay a little longer, but by the way, I see several people talking about child marriage. There's a great organization working on child marriage. Roxy, do you remember the name of it?
Tari, TARIH Center, Justice Center. Is it that?
Oh, I can't remember. But if you Google around, you'll probably find it. It's a really wonderful organization. Any other questions? By the way, the other thing you could do is run for public office, especially you younger folks, but anybody really. I always say this to my students on first day of class. I go, so how many of you want to be on the Supreme Court? How many of you want to be in Congress? How many of you are running for school board? I mean, we need good feminist women, LGBTQ people. You know, and you're so much smarter than they are. I mean, my God, just look. I mean, you know, we need to be in charge. And by the way, so many people have come through the feminist majority, like our young feminist leadership, that are now in all kinds of positions of power, attorneys general, you know, U.S. attorney. I mean, just so I just really encourage you to set your sights high. Um, so yeah, I just would love for you to do that.
And the Young Feminist Conference is starting this weekend, the 28th, and it's going to be in Alexandria, Virginia. There's plenty of
Yes.
information on that. Go to feminist .org.
Yes. Absolutely. It's so wonderful. And then they go and lobby on Monday after the weekend. It's actually this coming weekend, I think. But I imagine you could still join if you're anywhere near there. I see Jerry Richards mentioned, think about asking where funds for CPCs come from and is the use of that money audited. A lot of conservative states takes your taxpayer dollars and funnel them to CPCs. There's often no accountability, no transparency. There's a great group called Reproductive Health and Freedom Watch that tracks that. And even in conservative states, people don't like their taxpayer dollars just disappearing into a black hole. And so there's a lot of effort in conservative states to try to make for some accountability. So that's something that you can do in a conservative state that, you know, might get some traction. So that's something. I see folks put into the chat talking about there is some attempts to try to overturn Obergefell, and that is pretty scary. And that is something that folks could work on. I don't think that's going to happen because I think there are too many gay people in MAGA. I know that sounds odd, but I think it's true. But it could happen. But anyway, I'm looking at all of this. Oh, you've had so many great chats. But anyway, are there any more questions, Roxy, or should we close?
We can wrap up.
Yeah, and I do want to just say go to No Kings on Saturday. Absolutely go to No Kings. I think people in the street is so valuable. And it just feels good. I mean, it really does feel good. If you haven't been, go. There's great signs that you can make connections. You can learn about who in your community is organizing. Go to Indivisible. You know, they are often really grassroots, you can find what issues you connect with. There are I mean, we've been talking about women's rights issue. There are environmental issues. There's all kinds of things going on at the grassroots. I don't think I've ever seen America so mobilized, so on fire. There's a massive pushback and lots of ways to get involved. Okay, Sue, I'll turn it over to you.
Everybody, I want to thank you so much, Carrie. That was fantastic. One of our most enlightening meetings and programs. And I want to encourage everybody to read The Ms. online, in print, and all of Carrie's other articles and books. You'll learn a lot, and be sure to follow the suggestions and act on it and do everything Carrie suggested, and continue to help us all out. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming, and thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, great to be with you all.